You've got the cacophony of unpleasant experience, and then you've got this place in the middle of it, or apparent place in the middle of it, from which you're trying to resist this experience, right? Or trying to figure out how to change it, right? So let's say you have a terrible pain, somewhere in your body. There's the pain, there's the strong stimulus of unpleasant sensation, the burning and stabbing and twisting feeling. And then there's this reaction to it from apparently some point outside the pain, very likely, for most people up in the head. I mean, most people feel like they're a subject in their heads that is not truly coincident with the rest of their body. They don't feel, most people for the most part don't feel identical to their bodies. They feel like they have bodies. And these bodies can misbehave in various ways. And again, so you have a terrible pain. The pain's down there. Let's say it's in your knee. You're up here, now a hostage being tortured by the misbehavior of the rest of your body, right? And you're resisting. You're trying to find some way of resisting these sensations. And so it is with emotional distress or unpleasant thoughts, right? You can have thoughts that terrorize you. And all of it seems to suggest, I mean, this is the extreme case of stark unhappiness, but even in the best of times, right? Even when things are going really well and everything experience is very smooth and we're getting what we want, and our favorite treats are just an arm's length away, and we're filling our mouths with gumdrops or whatever it is. We're gratifying this thing at the center of our experience, and it can never be finally gratified because experience itself is impermanent. It's just you get to the thing you want, and you gorge yourself on it, and then not only
want a new thing.
You want a new thing. Then you need a drink of water because this lingering taste in your mouth of chocolate mousse or whatever it is too cloying and too much, and you got to wash that out so that you wouldn't want to stay in that state even if you could. And there's kind of this rolling dissatisfaction, even in satisfaction.
Okay, so here Harris is explaining how emotional distress or unpleasant thoughts can create a cycle of dissatisfaction. Even when life is going well, he's pointing out that in moments of happiness or pleasure, like enjoying your favorite treat, like the chocolate mousse he talked about, this sense of fulfillment is fleeting. Once you've had what you wanted, you're already craving something else, something new. So this cycle of desire and short-lived satisfaction reflects how our experiences are impermanent, leaving us always wanting more, even when we're satisfied, quote unquote. I mean, it's not hard to see that the hedonic treadmill is always with us. It's ever present, where we constantly seek pleasure, but once it's obtained, we quickly return to a baseline level of happiness. And even when we do achieve something we desire, it rarely ever leads to lasting contentment. So, in summary, I think Harris is showing how even in our most pleasurable moments, there's a constant underlying dissatisfaction because our desires are never truly fulfilled, and hence the rolling dissatisfaction, even in satisfaction, that he talked about. And that can lead to emotional distress, default emotional distress. I don't know. Yeah, I hope that helps. All right, let's get back to the video. Yeah, let me know down in the comments what you think about my interpretation of this. If did I get it right, or do you have a different perspective?
That we all encounter, even in the best of times, right? Even when you literally can get anything, more or less anything you want. And yet we know at any moment it can be subverted by something terrible happening. At any moment you can suddenly feel like you're you might be having a heart attack, right? And then that becomes the thing that this sense of me in the middle of everything collapses upon, and it makes life. I mean, this again, this sense of being in this vulnerable center, right? It makes life this kind of long emergency that can be pacified by, increasingly strenuous efforts to control experience, right? We have to control this thing because at any moment, we're constently, if you just look
at any moment we might die.
Yeah, we're avoiding death, but even if for those of us who don't think about death very often, I mean, and there are those people, we're constantly modifying our experience so as to avoid discomfort, whether it's social discomfort or physical discomfort, or just every correction in our bodies. I mean, if you just try to sit still for an hour, you'll notice that all of the micro adjustments in posture that you're now no longer making are made because you really don't have to wait long before you feel miserable. I mean, your body, the amount of pain you can get just sitting in the most comfortable chair you can find in your home and just resolving not to move is quite extraordinary. It's just, it's just, there's no position that's comfortable enough that it will be comfortable an hour from now. And so it is, in fact, true to say that for most people, I mean, literally 99.9% of our audience, they couldn't pay attention to the breath for a full minute, say, even if their lives depended on it, right? It's just like, it's simply not in the cards. It's not, the fate of the world could depend on it. And someone who's not really fairly well trained in this just couldn't do it. And so that's interesting, right? What's interesting is that despite your best efforts, you get carried away by thought helplessly, moment after moment. Now, being able to break that spell, being able to see thought as thought, I mean, so eventually, once you get some degree of mindfulness in hand, you no longer confine your attention to the breath or any other arbitrary object. You begin to open it up to everything you can possibly experience. So it's just, sights and sounds and sensations and emotions and thoughts themselves can become objects of mindfulness. But this is the kind of the crucial, kind of almost binary difference, which produces an immense amount of psychological benefit. The moment you can really notice thoughts themselves as appearances in consciousness rather than what you are in each moment. Because what happens is, in the default case, the thoughts kind of creep up from behind us in some sense. They kind of come out of nowhere, and that just feels like me, right? So I'm trying to...
It's a reflexive identification.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't act the damn things out if they didn't feel like you,
Right.
And so they have to have that impulse to action in them that's part of felt identity.
Right. So
you're saying that
yes.
you're saying, and this is part of, I suppose, part of the Buddhist tradition particularly, although not only, that being the puppet of those thoughts is part of what prolongs suffering, at least under some circumstances, especially being the puppet of them. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this is so, but the people listening to us now can feel this. So we're talking, and people are trying to understand the thread of this conversation, but it's that they have a voice in their head that's competing with this, right? They're trying to listen to us, but they're also thinking, right? And so they might think, well, what the hell is he talking about, right? Like there's just some intrusive thought comes in, or like, oh no, wait a minute, he didn't answer the question. That thought, that feels, if you're identified with it, if you don't see it as mere language appearing in consciousness or mere imagery, right? it feels like me. It's like that is the self. That is
it also feels like what I believe.
Yeah,
and,
it's just
that's
there's
also
no space
extremely
around
interesting.
it.
Yeah, well, one of the things you do in clinical work all the time, especially in the cognitive behavioral field, is you help people identify those thoughts in some sense as objects, to no longer identify with them and to say, just because you think that, it's not necessarily true, it's not necessarily you, and it's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, and it does have this dreamlike character of both coming out of nowhere and completely seizing the reins of attention and identity and taking us elsewhere. And also we forget it. It has
That's part of the totalitarian spirit of rationality, that proclivity.
Well, but but a lot of these thoughts aren't rational. It's just you're just rehearsing your experience. It's just like, you'll tell yourself the same thing 10 times in a row and you won't be bored on the 10th time. You'll like, if you just imagine what it would be like to externalize your thoughts on a loudspeaker for everyone to listen to, and it was just helplessly, externalized. Every normal person would sound insane. Because of the perseveration and just the redundancy and the strange structure to the discursiveness. I mean, this is this is ever present. It's so ever present that it doesn't strike people as strange. But to be presuming we have a dialogue with ourselves as though the I could talk to the me. And that made any sense at all. It's like, I'm sitting here and getting set up for this interview, right? And I'll think, I got to get some water, right? Now, I know if I'm the one to say it and I'm the one to hear it, right? I know I need water. Who am I telling?
Yeah.
It's like I'm telling someone else. Right, who needs to be informed about this?
Well, you're probably telling the prefrontal cortex, and it tells the motor cortex. So that's probably the hypothalamus talking to the prefrontal cortex because it doesn't have direct output over the motor cortex. It's something like that.
Yeah. So there are two levels at which we can address this problem of thought and its connection to suffering. And one is at the level of thought itself, right? It's like you can replace bad thoughts with better thoughts, right? You can triangulate on your tendency to have one kind of conversation with yourself, and engineer a better conversation with yourself, right? And that's in cognitive behavioral therapy.
You can stop thinking like a 6-year-old, for example, and start thinking like a 30-year-old.
Right. And what's more, a 30-year-old that actually has good intentions for you, right? Like a friend, right? You can make your mind your friend.
Yeah, loved one even.
Yes, yeah. Can you imagine that? So
imagine that.